There is a stone at the heart of Stonehenge that nobody talks about. Not the towering sarsen arches that frame the sky in every photograph. Not the bluestones hauled from the mountains of Wales. The stone nobody talks about is the one at the very center, flat on the ground, half buried, almost invisible beneath two larger stones that collapsed onto it thousands of years ago. It is called the altar stone. 6 tons of pale green sandstone, 5 meters long, lying there since roughly 2500 BC. For centuries, visitors walked right over it without knowing. Inigo Jones, the 17th century architect who first attempted to document Stonehenge, named it the altar stone because he assumed it was used for sacrifice. He had no evidence. The name stuck anyway. For 4,000 years, no one knew where it came from, and until very recently, no one had the tools to find out. In August 2024, a paper published in the journal Nature ended the mystery and opened a stranger one. The search for the altar stone's origin began, as many breakthroughs do, with a failure. For decades, geologists assumed the altar stone came from South Wales, from the same Preseli hills that supplied many of Stonehenge's smaller bluestones. It was a reasonable assumption. The color was similar, the distance was manageable, about 250 kilometers, and the Preseli Hills were already known as a source, so applying that origin to an unidentified stone felt logical. Then, in the early 2020s, researchers began applying a technique called detrital mineral analysis to fragments of the altar stone held in museum collections. The method works by extracting microscopic grains, zircon, apatite, rutile, from within the rock and measuring their ages using radiometric dating. Each grain formed at a specific moment in geological history, under specific conditions, in a specific place. Together, they create what geochemists call a fingerprint, a unique barcode of deep time that can be compared statistically against rock formations across the British Isles. The team, led by Anthony Clark of Curtin University in Australia and including geologists from Wales, Scotland, England, Canada, and Italy, ran the analysis. Then they ran it again and again, because the result kept coming back the same, and it was not what anyone expected. The altar stone did not come from Wales. It came from Scotland, specifically from a geological region called the Orcadian Basin, an ancient sedimentary formation covering the northeastern tip of mainland Scotland, the Orkney Islands, and part of the Shetland Islands. The nearest plausible source was over 700 kilometers from Stonehenge, in a straight line. When we first got the data, Clark said in an interview with NPR, I looked at it and I said, there's no way this can be so distinctly Scottish. So we did more analysis, and time again, it was just so distinctly not from southern Britain. The altar stone has traveled the longest known distance of any stone used in any Neolithic monument in Britain. It was moved before the invention of the wheel, before horses were used as draft animals in this part of the world, before writing, before bronze. How they moved it is unknown. The researchers suspect the sea, a coastal and island route hugging the shores of Britain, the stone lashed to some kind of raft or vessel. The open waters between Scotland and England are not gentle, but the alternative, over land, through forests, across rivers, over hills, is almost harder to imagine. Either way, someone decided that this particular stone, from this particular place, was worth a journey of several hundred miles, and they made it happen. Why is the question that keeps archaeologists awake. To begin to answer it, you have to look north, far north. The Orkney Islands sit off the very tip of Scotland, in the cold waters between the Atlantic and the North Sea. They are windswept, treeless, and remote. Most people in the world could not locate them on a map. And yet, 5,000 years ago, Orkney was one of the most culturally significant places in Britain. The evidence has been accumulating for decades. At a site called Skara Brae, preserved under sand dunes until a storm uncovered it in 1850, archaeologists found a complete Neolithic village. Stone houses with stone furniture, hearths, beds, and shelves, abandoned around 2500 BC in near-perfect condition. The The village was occupied at the same time Stonehenge was being built. The people who lived there produced a distinctive style of pottery called grooved ware, flat-bottomed, heavily decorated, that spread from Orkney southward across the entirety of Britain and Ireland. Grooved ware pottery has been found in abundance at Durrington Walls, the settlement adjacent to Stonehenge, where the monument's builders are believed to have lived. The houses at Durrington Walls have the same layout as the houses at Skara Brae, over 1,000 kilometers away. The Ring of Brodgar and the stones of Stonehenge, two stone circles on Orkney that predate Stonehenge, share architectural principles with the monuments of southern England. A mace head carved from Louisian gneiss, a stone found only in the Outer Hebrides and Orkney, was found in a burial near Stonehenge. Carved stone balls, mysterious spherical objects found at Neolithic sites across Scotland, have no known function. No one has explained them. What the archaeological record is quietly insisting, piece by piece, is that Orkney was not a remote backwater. It was a center, a place of ritual significance and cultural influence that radiated southward, pulling the rest of Britain into its orbit. And Stonehenge, the monument we think of as the heart of prehistoric Britain, may have been built, in part, as a monument to a connection with that distant northern world. The altar stone, lying at the very center of Stonehenge, at the focal point of its solar alignment, brought to Salisbury Plain from the far end of Scotland before the wheel existed, may have been placed there precisely because of where it came from. Not despite the distance, but because of it. Distance, in the Neolithic world, was not an obstacle to be overcome. It was a measure of significance. But the nature paper did something else, something quieter and more unsettling. It did not just reveal where the altar stone came from. It revealed the limit of what we know. The researchers were careful in their language. They could identify the Orcadian Basin as the source. They could not identify the precise quarry. They could not trace the route. They could not explain the motivation. They could not tell us who made the decision, who executed the journey, or what the stone meant to the people who moved it. A follow-up study, published in the Journal of Archaeological Science, reports, examining the mineralogy of the stone circles on Orkney itself, the Ring of Brodgar and the stones of Stonehenge, concluded that the altar stone was probably not from mainland Orkney specifically, but from elsewhere in the Orcadian Basin. The search for the precise origin continues, and beneath that uncertainty lies a larger one. Because the altar stone is not the only unsourced element of Stonehenge, there are bluestones at the site whose precise quarry origins are still debated. The purpose of the monument, solar calendar, burial site, healing sanctuary, pilgrimage destination, some combination of all of these, remains contested. The people who built it left no written record, no names, no explanation. What the geochemical analysis did, with extraordinary precision, is narrow the geography. It found a fingerprint in stone that had been cold for 700 kilometers and 4,000 years. It pointed at a corner of Scotland and said, "Here." It solved the oldest question about Stonehenge: where does the central stone come from? And in doing so, made the deeper questions feel more urgent. Why Scotland? Why this stone? Why the center? The people who brought a 6-ton block of rock from the far north of Britain to the middle of Salisbury Plain, who organized that journey, sustained it, and completed it without wheels, without iron tools, without any of the things we associate with large-scale logistics, knew why. They knew what they were doing, and they did it with an intentionality that the stone itself still radiates, lying there, half buried, quietly pointing back toward the place it came from. We have the fingerprint. We do not have the name. There is a detail in Anthony Clark's account of the discovery that stays with you. The 6 researchers who co-authored the Nature paper had been working together for years. They collaborated virtually across multiple countries. Australia, Wales, Scotland, England, Canada, Italy. They had never been in the same place at the same time. When the paper was finally published, they arranged to meet, in person, for the first time. At Stonehenge, Clark described what it was like. The fog was rolling over the hills. It was cold, quiet, surreal, he said. Standing at the monument they had spent years studying, finally in the same physical space as the stone that had sent them on this journey. In that moment, something collapsed. The distance between now and then, between the researchers with their mass spectrometers and statistical models, and the people who stood here 5,000 years ago, looking at a stone they had carried from the edge of the world. Between the modern question, where does this come from, and the ancient one, which was probably something else entirely, something we don't have a word for. The altar stone is still there, still buried, still pointing north. The machine found its fingerprint. The rest is waiting.